Welcome to this next episode of the Year in Review series, where I am talking about how the year has been, not just for me, but for you. So you might be wondering, how do I know how the year has been for you? Well, frankly speaking, I don't. But guess what? Somebody has been kind enough to keep a track of you right through the year. And no prizes for guessing who that is. That is, of course, our big daddy, Google. I shouldn't say much because we are on a Google owned platform here. So, without saying anything that gets me into a situation where I put my foot into my mouth, let me just stick to the topic. So, in one of the previous episodes, we spoke about the year in search and what Google believes the world has been looking for. One of the central themes that emerged from this study was the theme of people looking for the search term, can I change? And there were multiple dimensions of this aspect of can I change, which I've covered in episode 6 of this Year in Review series. But what we will be talking about in today's episode is just one of those dimensions, which is extremely important, hence it deserves its own episode, which is how to be positive. This search term is a bit uncanny because it matches almost exactly with the title of my book, which I released a couple of years ago and launched a revised version this year, which is called How to Stay Positive and Productive. So we'll stick to that 50% of the book title, which is talking about how to be positive. And that's what our focus for this episode is going to be. But before we get started, let us stick to the theme of understanding the world, understanding you through the eyes of Google and the rich data that it leaves behind for all of us to review and analyze. My earlier episodes and conclusions were taken directly from the Year in Search report that is published by Google. But this time, because we are doing a dedicated episode on how to be positive, I am going an extra mile and drilling much deeper into the specific search term, how to be positive. And while looking at the data, I found three distinct takeaways. So let's dive into each one of them. First up, we need to understand what is the trend of how to be positive. While we know from the Year in Search report that how to be positive was a massively searched term this year, but let's try and roll back the clock and see what the trend has been over the years. So if you look at this chart from Google Trends, you will see that the number of people searching for how to be positive has consistently been increasing over the years, and it has almost reached a peak point in the recent past. The second big takeaway from this chart is the number of spikes that you see. And if you look closely at the timelines of these spikes, you will immediately know what was happening and when is it that the world was trying to be more positive. First up, of course, it was the onset of the pandemic, and just before the pandemic, people started looking for how to be positive, and it pretty much peaked when the whole world knew that they are going to be in a lockdown and they are going to be struggling with this pandemic, and they are in it for the long haul. It's not a short drawn affair which will go away very soon. That was the time when there was negativity in the air. Everywhere people looked, they only found negative news, whether it is the mainstream media or social media. Even if it was just statistics around the coronavirus, the number of people affected, the number of people recovering, the number of deaths, they were doing the rounds pretty much on everybody's mobile screens and computers and occupying their mind space. That is when, thankfully, a large proportion of the population realized that they need to get out from this rut. There is no escape and they have to learn how to be positive. So that was one of the spikes that we saw in about February, March, April 2020 or so. The second spike, as you can see from this chart, is around the time Russia-Ukraine war happened, and the ripples of this were felt worldwide, not just in these two countries, but everywhere else because of the geopolitical interlinkages and also the fact that the supply chains are completely intertwined, and what happens in one or two countries does impact the rest of the world, especially if we are talking about large countries like Russia and Ukraine. I did not have the benefit of looking at these data points in March 2020, but based on my anecdotal evidence and intuitive understanding, I knew that the world needs a dose of positivity in those times. And that is how, in conversations with people, I spoke about the need to be positive, to view the pandemic as an opportunity. These conversations had a flywheel effect. It led to an article, the article led to further conversations, and these conversations then found their way into a book that was released in March 2020 itself, which is How to Stay Positive and Productive. If I knew that this was the sort of correlation, I should have maybe come up with a revised edition of my book earlier in the year rather than at the fag end, because I just released the updated version of this book in November 2022, where I've updated each and every chapter with postscripts and also added two brand new chapters so that the experiences that I have to share around how to stay positive, especially during these times, become relevant to the new normal as well, instead of just being relevant to a lockdown or a pandemic situation. Coming back to the chart, I've spoken about the macro trend and the spikes that we see, but a coin has two sides. Every spike is followed by a trough. But what is interesting to note here, which may not be visible from this chart, but if we flip this chart around to a month-wise view, then we will see that the troughs have typically happened in particular months during the year. Why is it that every year during these particular months, people suddenly start searching less for how to be positive? Is it that they do not want to be positive anymore? Or is it that they are naturally positive and they do not feel the need to search for an additional impetus to be positive? Well, I don't know the answer to this, but this is an interpretation. Take it with a pinch of salt. Feel free to come up with your own interpretations. By the way, this is worldwide data, so it is not specific to any geography. But when I did drill down deeper into this, I found that these patterns correlate more with the United States than with other major countries of the world. So just bear that in mind when you look at the holiday seasons. Speaking of holiday seasons, you may note that these two troughs are happening typically in the holiday season in December, when everybody is switching off after a hectic year and winding down for the Christmas and the New Year holidays. So that is a time when people are naturally happy. They are spending time with family, they are taking a break from work. Maybe they do not feel the need to go to Google and ask how to be positive because they are already positive, they are already joyful. And the second time this happens during the year is around the summer vacations or thereabouts. So that may also be one of the contributing factors, although I cannot say for certainty. This data though has been taken from around a decade, so it is fairly representative. Those were the three takeaways that we had from the data. One, looking at long-term trends. Second, looking at the spikes and the events that led to a surge in people searching for how to be positive. And the third one was a dip or a trough when people were not searching for these terms as much as they would otherwise do during the year. These give us very interesting insights on what people are thinking, what are their actions, what is their mindset, what are they looking to achieve. And this can be reviewed not just at a global level, but at a country level as well. That's the power of data analysis. There is another dimension through which we can analyze this aspect of people searching for how to be positive. The good part is that yes, people are positive minded already because they are searching for how to be positive. So that's the good news. What's the bad news? The bad news is that people are probably in a negative state of mind, or at the very minimum in a non-positive state of mind. And that does not augur well for the mental health of the world at large. But there is a better news inside this as well. Of course, we are talking about how to be positive, so we got to end on a positive note, right? The better news that we have here is that people are searching for how to be positive rather than searching for how not to be negative, how to avoid worrying, how to stop worrying, how to stop negativity. That is a very negative way of approaching the problems that you have in your life. And we also looked at data around many of these search terms and we did not find the search volumes to be very high. So the best news is that people already intuitively know that if they have to run away from their problems, they do not need to search for a way to get out of the problems. What they need to do is approach positivity, focus on entering a new world of positivity, of productivity, of well-being, of leveling up. Those are the kind of things that people have been looking for, as we also saw in the earlier episode, whose central theme itself was, can I change? So the focus is on doing what is right and on the controllables, which we spoke at length in the earlier episode. However, these are just the data points. And as we've been doing right through this series, what we really need to do is go deep and take a look into the underlying phenomena and the reasons for these results. Why is it that the world starts suddenly looking for terms such as how to be positive in certain times and abandons these searches at other times? What is propelling these forces? It's not too difficult if we understand how the human mind works. We are living in a very content-rich world of information explosion where we are being bombarded with news from all over the place. The news feed and the content that we consume is not just limited to the mainstream media, who obviously have their own vested interests, they have their own axe to grind, and they know very well that nothing sells like negativity, which is why From time immemorial, the newspapers and the TV channels have been splashing negative news like anything, whereas positive news, acts of positivity, acts of a human being helping another, being kind to another, are not things that would make headlines, although they would make your day. And the cumulative impact of all the goodness in the world would make for a much better world. But would the news channels have a stake in it? Would they be enriched because of this? Probably not. Which is why they much rather perpetuate and feed the vicious cycle which feeds negative content and spirals it. Once this starts making place, what happens next is the world of social media. These days, social media or other content platforms, they are driven by algorithms. The algorithms do not make value judgments. They only understand patterns. And because human beings have a tendency to gravitate towards negative stuff, towards sensationalism, what these algorithms do pick up is these signals that this is what people really want to do. As a result, during these panic times, during these crisis times, what really happens is people start sharing more and more of such negative news. They start flooding social media with such content. And the algorithms, well, as I said, they do not have morals, they do not make value judgments, so they just pick up whatever is trending. Because guess what? The social media platforms, what do they want? They also have a commercial interest in keeping the users engaged. And this gives rise to the third set of reactions, the tertiary reactions, which is between people to people. Once you're seeing this on mainstream media, secondly, you're seeing it on social media. What is the third thing that happens? People start talking about this and sharing it on their WhatsApp groups or other private communication channels. As a result, if any bystander is watching and observing this sea of negativity, they tend to believe that there is nothing else apart from this that is really worth talking about, and that's what reinforces this vicious cycle. Hence, it is very, very important not just to be looking for how to be positive, which is a great start, by the way. As I said, it's much better than trying to avoid negativity or getting sucked into the whirlpool of negativity. It's a great start, but is it enough? The forces that we are fighting against are massive. They are giants that are ruling the world, that are dominating the content narrative in the world out there. So, what I have been doing in the recent past, in my own small little way, is a challenge to this content narrative and changing the content narrative from one of vicious negativity to one of positivity. With that spirit, I wrote the book that I mentioned about how to stay positive and productive, thankfully, just at the right time when the world needed it, as we now know in hindsight by looking at the data. And secondly, we've started a platform called From the Expert's Mouth, which is now 2 years old. But the primary pillar of From the Expert's Mouth is that people share their experiences, they connect with each other, share positive stories, and help others learn from their experiences. This user driven content and the spirit behind it and the genuine content has helped the platform reach readers in almost 170 countries now. And I could not have been more thankful for that. So I will drop a link in the description below. Do check out the platform. And it's an open platform free for anybody to come in and share their experiences. Let us all join together in this movement, not just to search how to be positive, but actually to make a change and to contribute to the positivity by being a part of the content narrative and contributing. And before you run enthusiastically to participate on the platform, there's one more thing that you need to do. I would love for you to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. And also drop in your comments about what resonated with you and what you're planning to do about being positive, helping others around you be positive, and changing the content narrative of the world. See you in the next episode.